How do you know you're in perimenopause? I want to tell you about the time when I found out. So, I was working from home and I was deep into this query that I was building for a while, and then an error started cascading. And it was just this random, stupid thing that happens sometimes. And I just lost the whole query. I flipped out, I banged on the table, I screamed, and my partner came in to check on me, and I just said, Don't. I was so gone, I didn't even want to talk to him. That was the first explosion of my entire life. So that was one of three things that told me clearly that, I might be entering perimenopause. So today I'm going to walk you through the signs, what actually changes, what it feels like from the inside, and what you can do early before things feel out of control. Before we get into the signs, I want to talk to the women who almost didn't click on this video because a lot of women don't want to know, or they know something is shifting and they're not really ready to name it yet. And I understand why. Most of the stories that we've inherited about menopause are loss stories. So, end of fertility, becoming irrelevant, the beginning of a decline, your body turning against you, becoming invisible. And there's grief wrapped around this transition and a cultural narrative around it that makes it much harder to avoid. We live in a world where a woman's worth has been measured for a very long time by how fertile she is, how young she looks, how desirable she is to a man. And perimenopause challenges all of that. So, of course, it feels threatening. But here's what I want to offer to you. The lens, the one that says it's a decline, is a very narrow, very old, very patriarchal lens. And it's not the only one available to you. Every woman goes through this, every single one. And you only go through this once. This is a rite of passage, the way that adolescence was a rite of passage, a threshold. It's a becoming. In many traditions, indigenous, Chinese, Ayurvedic, this phase of a woman's life is recognized as one of power and wisdom. The energy that used to flow outward into reproduction, into nurturing, into producing begins to turn inward toward self-knowledge, towards something deeper. She is more of herself, more whole, more free from the roles and expectations that she's been performing. But you can only claim that if you show up for this transition consciously, if you pay attention, if you don't close your eyes and call it aging. So don't let this narrow lens rob you of this phase. It deserves your full presence, your care, and your attention. This is your becoming. Own it. Here's what most women do. They wait until the symptoms are disrupting their sleep, their relationship, their work, and then they start asking questions. And on top of that, a lot of women aren't even ready to talk about it because the associations with it are so negative. So they push through, they dismiss the signs and chalk it up to stress and lose years they could have used to prepare. The earlier you recognize what's happening, the more tools you have available. You can make shifts in how you eat, how you train, how you manage stress before the transition gets loud. I started paying attention to this in my late 30s, following researchers, tracking my cycle, learning what was coming. So when the signs started at 43, I wasn't blindsided. I was watching. That's the edge I want to give you today. And one more thing before we get into the signs. Perimenopause cannot be definitively diagnosed with a blood test. Hormones fluctuate so much during this phase that a single test might catch you on a day when estrogen is spiking and look completely normal. But blood work can tell you if your hormones are already significantly low. And that's useful data. But doctors generally diagnose based on your symptoms, which means you need to know what those symptoms are. So you're not taking something for anxiety when it's actually hormones. So you're not treating insomnia in isolation when there are 5 other signs that are also happening. The more clearly you can name what you're experiencing, the better equipped you are to get the right support. So sign number 1, the first reliable signal for most women is a change in the menstrual cycle. Not necessarily a huge change, it's often very subtle, but it's there if you're watching. So first, a quick map of how this transition actually unfolds, because most people don't know this. We don't just start perimenopause one day. There's no switch that just flips. It's a gradual progression. In the late reproductive phase, which is where women in their late 30s, early 40s often are, cycles are still fairly regular. but you may start noticing subtle changes. And this is premenopause. Things are beginning to shift. And then comes early perimenopause, where cycle length starts to vary noticeably from your normal. So getting shorter than 25 days or longer than 35 days and becoming less predictable. This is when estrogen starts to fluctuate more erratically. Late perimenopause, which is the 4 to 5 years leading up to menopause, this is where the cycle becomes significantly irregular. You might go 2 to 3 months without a period and get one again. Symptoms are often strongest in this window and for the 4 to 5 years post-menopause as well. Menopause itself is one single point in time. It is the day where you have gone 12 consecutive months without a period. It is literally one day, like a birthday. And post-menopause is everything after that. Symptoms don't necessarily end at menopause. Many women experience them for years on the other side. So, in the early stages, the changes are subtle. A slight shortening or occasional variation in a cycle that used to be predictable. When cycle starts going significantly shorter or longer than your personal norm, that's a clear sign you've moved into the transition. So your bleeding pattern may also change, heavier or lighter than your normal, or a different start-stop rhythm. Sometimes a cycle just disappears for a month and then comes back. My own story, for my whole adult life, I was on a 30-day cycle, sometimes 31, and it was very regular. In my early 40s, I started hitting 20 days. And then around 43, I was mostly 28 days and starting to hit a 26-day cycle. I've never seen a 30-day again. Conventional medicine would look at 26 to 28 days and say, that's perfectly normal. And technically, it's right. It's not wrong. But compared to my baseline of 31 days, it's clearly shortening. And that matters. This is a key takeaway. It's not about what's normal by the book or what's normal for everyone else. It's about your baseline. Your cycle is your compass. And this is exactly why it matters to start tracking your cycle in your 30s before you hit perimenopause. Before anything changes, track your cycle length, your mood across the month, your physical energy, your PMS. Know you're normal because when shifts happen, you'll recognize them. You'll have something to compare to. You won't be guessing. Sign number 2. One of the most confusing things about perimenopause is that hormones don't just gradually decline. They fluctuate wildly. So one month you might have high estrogen and the next it crashes. And that roller coaster is what drives a lot of the symptoms. Before the full hot flashes develops, many women notice they're just running warmer than they used to. Rooms that used to feel fine now feels more stuffy. You wake up warmer at night. So you may also notice caffeine affecting you more differently. More jittery, more sweating, more anxious after a cup. And this happens because perimenopause already puts your nervous system in a more activated state. The adrenal glands are working harder, cortisol is more reactive, and caffeine just amplifies all of that. It's one of the earlier signs that your system is changing. Hot flashes can also start earlier than most women expect, well before your period stops. How do you know if it's a hot flash versus just being warm? A hot flash is sudden. It rises, and often from the chest or the face, and sometimes with sweating, a racing heart, flushed skin. It comes out of nowhere and often just passes within a few minutes. Sleep disruptions, not being able to fall asleep or waking up in the middle of the night. Waking up at 3 a.m. and not being able to fall asleep is a classic pattern. I've had a few stretches of this myself. I sought out acupuncture, which helped. In traditional Chinese medicine, or TCM, 3 a.m. sits at the liver meridian's window, and waking up in this hour is associated with what TCM calls kidney yin deficiency, the root of hormonal decline in their framework. It's a very fascinating lens, and it deserves its own episode. I'm mentioning it because I find it meaningful that a medical tradition thousands of years old has a detailed map for exactly this. Other hormone-driven shifts you might experience: breast tenderness, that's new or worsen. Luteal phase, which is the last 2 weeks of your cycle, that's starting to feel harder, maybe more PMS, more heaviness in the second half of your cycle. Skin changes, dryness, texture shifts, new breakouts. I also had 2 years of chronic skin itch in my late 30s, early 40s. I was diagnosed with chronic urticaria and was told I was going to have to take this pill for the rest of my life. I went to see an acupuncturist and addressed it there. Now, looking back, I believe hormonal fluctuation was likely a contributing factor. That experience really opened the door for me into how TCM approaches the body, and I've stayed curious about it ever since. Sign number three, mood changes. So, this is where a lot of women start questioning themselves, not their hormones, but themselves. Let me come back to that opening story about the rage. I have never been someone who loses my temper. I rarely even express much anger. So, when that explosion happened, the screaming, the banging on the table, the like pushing my partner away, I was shocked myself because that was completely foreign. Estrogen plays a role in emotional regulation. So when it starts to fluctuate, spiking high and then crashing, you can feel less tolerant, less resilient. And progesterone, which normally rises in the second half of your cycle, has a calming and buffering effect. And that starts to become less reliable because as your progesterone starts dropping, the rise doesn't really go that high anymore. So less ovulation, less ovulation means less progesterone, and without that buffer, a situation that would normally register as a 3 out of a 10 suddenly hits you like a 7. You know logically it shouldn't be this big, but your body isn't following the logic anymore. Think about the last few months. Have you noticed yourself reacting more intensely than what feels normal to you? And here's something I've come to believe, and this took time to see clearly. The range isn't just hormones. There is wisdom underneath every emotion that surfaces in midlife. Perimenopause has a way of bringing up everything that was never quite aligned with you. All these years that were really a no, all the times you let your boundaries be crossed without saying anything, all the ways you played along or just went along and stayed quiet. The physiological shift is also an emotional and mental cleansing. It surfaces what's ready to be questioned, what's time to let go of, what you've been carrying that was never yours to carry. The rage I felt that day, sitting at my computer losing that query, it wasn't really just about the query. When I sat with it honestly, I could feel what was underneath. I had been spending years doing work that my hands could do, but my heart wasn't in. Technically skilled, professionally competent, but increasingly disconnected from any sense of meaning or purpose. The frustration had been there for a long time. My hormones just finally let it out. And that explosion was the beginning of a real reckoning for me. And that wasn't the only thing perimenopause brought to the surface. For about 8 months in the last year, my luteal phase was emotionally heavy. I mourned old identities. I was brought to emotions I had never fully processed. They created such an intense friction inside of me that I couldn't avoid them anymore. I had to address them and I had to communicate them. Today, for the past 3 cycles, I haven't experienced intense mood swings and I haven't had rage in over a year. I'm still more irritable and less patient than I used to be around my luteal phase, but the intensity is much less. So I feel like a lot of things have cleared. So if there's one thing I want to say about this, if you can start owning your truth now, feeling your emotions, speaking them, living more aligned with what's actually you, the perimenopause ride will be emotionally much smoother. The hormones will amplify whatever is unresolved. You can either do that consciously with choice and intention, or your hormones will do it for you. The pattern I noticed in myself evolved gradually. In my 20s and 30s, I would have a low in my week 3 of the cycle, wanting to be in my bubble, just less social, and wanting to be alone. In my late 30s and 40s, that shifted towards something heavier, more sadness, more gloomy thoughts. And then by mid 40s, it was just irritability and anger, occasionally rage. Many women also report anxiety that feels different from their baseline, not situational worry, but more like a background hum that wasn't there before. Brain fog. I want to talk about this one in detail because I just experienced my bout of it last month around day 17 of my cycle. Prior to that, I had noticed an uptick in forgetfulness overall, like always losing my phone, can't find my keys, searching for my words, but I chalked it up to having a lot on my mind. Then last month, when I had 5 days of bad sleep in a row, the next day, on that 6th day, something shifted. I couldn't even see the phone that was right in front of me. It's like my brain just wasn't processing anymore. I had a thought, and before I could finish it, it was gone. I felt emotionally blunted. I was super overwhelmed with just ordinary things, like looking around, seeing the clutter, and like not know what to do with it, and feeling like I don't even know where to start. And I realized in that moment, holy shit, this is brain fog. This is what people are talking about. You wake up one day and it's like you can't even get yourself out of bed. You can't even do basic mundane things. I mean, I've read about it, I knew about it, and now I was actually experiencing it. I mean, I'm not excited about it, but I was kind of excited, but not really. That experience taught me something I intellectually knew, but now believed it deeply. Sleep is the foundation in perimenopause. When it goes, everything goes. Protect your sleep before anything else. One other thing my brain fog taught me: multitasking is no longer my friend. I used to pride myself on it. Now, splitting my attention fragments everything. I've shifted to doing one thing at a time to completion, using external systems, reminders, scheduled blocks to hold what my brain used to carry. This isn't failure. This is adaptation. And honestly, it might be smarter. The fog forced me into a way of working that is less about pushing and more about precision. And I am much more picky on where I want to spend my energy on. Do I really need to do all these 10 things? Or is there really only one truly important thing I need to do? I started noticing more sensitivity in my joints in my early 40s. More cracking, not pain, but like things were less lubricated than before. It crept up gradually, nothing dramatic, more a general awareness that my body needs more care. And I definitely need more warm up before I do any training. Joint pain is very common. Estrogen has an anti inflammatory effect, and so as it fluctuates, the joints often feel it first. If you train, you may notice it takes longer to bounce back. What used to feel manageable now costs you more the next day. A late night, a few drinks, a hard session, and the recovery window gets longer. You might also notice how alcohol is affecting you, especially your recovery if you're someone who trains. The midsection shift, again, very common. Estrogen influences where the body stores fat, and as it changes, the distribution changes with it. Libido. I'll be direct about this one because I think it deserves an honest conversation. At 44, I experienced this sharp drop, not low desire exactly, but more like an indifference, a feeling of I could completely live without sex. It happens because estrogen and testosterone both influence libido and both shift in perimenopause. And I'm naming it here because this affects relationships. And a lot of times, a common story in couples in their 40s, 50s is often the man would say, she's not interested, and he doesn't know why. So when one partner's desire changes, and there's no shared understanding of why, couples can start to grow apart. Not because the love is gone, but because no one is talking about what's actually happening. And he might think that it's something about him, that she is not interested in him anymore. If intimacy matters to you, if your relationship matters to you, you need to have this conversation with your partner. You, the woman, you need to initiate this conversation with your partner. Because if you don't initiate, if you don't know better, what do they know? What would men know? This whole topic on relationship and intimacy in perimenopause deserves its own series, not even one episode. Intimacy in perimenopause is one of the most important conversations that we're not having, but it's coming. So, what do you do? What can you do? Start tracking. Before anything else, start a journal or download a cycle tracker like the Flow app. Track your cycle, track your sleep, your mood, your energy, even just a few sentences a day. And over time, you'll see patterns that you can't see in the moment. This data will be so valuable if you ever decide to work with a doctor, because then they won't tell you everything is normal by the book. You can actually show them, no, my norm was this, and now these things are happening. At 43, I sought out a doctor who specializes in hormones. I got a baseline lab done because I wanted data to track over time. A blood test won't diagnose perimenopause, but it'll give you a baseline. And if your hormones are already significantly low, it will catch it. If your symptoms are affecting your sleep, your mood, or your daily functioning, have a direct conversation with your doctor about perimenopause. Ask about hormone therapy. It's a legitimate option and worth understanding. Now, let's talk about natural support. While your ovaries are still active, so in early perimenopause, there are supports that can help smooth the fluctuations. Dr. Sarah Gottfried writes about the chaste berry in The Hormone Cure. It supports progesterone production by gently stimulating your pituitary gland, which is why it's particularly useful in early perimenopause when ovulation is becoming less reliable. Women often find it helps with PMS, breast tenderness, irregular cycles, and mood swings. It works gradually over months, so don't expect a next day effect. Dr. Geraldine Pryor, a Canadian endocrinologist, makes an important distinction people miss. In early perimenopause, estrogen is often high and erratic, while progesterone is slowly declining. That imbalance drives heavy bleeding, night sweats, mood swings, and sleep issues. So, supporting progesterone and protecting ovulation makes a real difference. She emphasizes that ovulation in midlife protects bone density and heart health. You protect your ovulation by doing what? Avoid extreme diets, excessive training loads, chronic high stress. Dr. Aviva Ram, an integrative physician, often starts with blood sugar balance because glucose and insulin swings amplify hot flashes, fatigue, and mood changes more than most women realize. I post frequently on what to eat in midlife, how to be protein forward, and how to approach carbs intelligently without eliminating them, how to stabilize blood sugar through the day. You can find a lot of this in my shorts, in my nourishment playlist, or on Instagram at ownyourbecoming_. Dr. Aviva Ram also works with adaptogen, and so does Dr. Cece Sims, talks a lot about adaptogens. These are plants that help the body adapt to stress. For example, ashwagandha, that has a calming and a restorative effect for people who are anxious, wired but tired, or struggling with sleep. Rhodiola, which is energizing, so if fatigue or brain fog are your main complaints, that's worth looking into. Holy basil for emotional resilience, if irritability and overwhelm are prominent. And maca root that can help with energy, low libido, and mood support. These aren't quick fixes, but paired with solid nutrition, movement, and stress management, they support a steadier baseline. Here's what I want to leave you with today. Perimenopause doesn't just announce itself all at once. It shows up in the cycles that shifts a little, in a rage that you didn't see coming, in joints that need more care, in a libido that just quietly went quiet, in a brain that's asking you to slow down. The women who navigate this well are the women who noticed early, who started tracking, asking the questions, making adjustments before things felt out of control. And more than that, the women who thrive in this transition are the ones who refused the old story, who didn't just call this aging and looked away, who owned their becoming, who showed up for their becoming. You don't have to be blindsided, and you don't have to shrink from this. If this video was helpful, subscribe. I put out content every week on training, nutrition, and the deeper journey of midlife. And if you have someone in your life who needs to hear this, share it with her. Thanks for tuning in, and see you next time.